I'm going to shoot a video today as I work on this 2024 VR1 850. Usually I just post pictures, but today what I'm going to do something different. I'm going to shoot a series of short videos on each step of the service that I do, just so that for anyone that is interested, they can see what exactly I do for the service, and you can see how it's done. So the first step that I'm going to do today is I'm going to remove the pipe, I'm going to remove the muffler, and I'm going to get in there and take those exhaust valves out so I can disassemble them and put them in the ultrasonic cleaner to get all the carbon buildup off of them. Okay, the pipe and the muffler are off now, and now what you need to do is remove the 4 bolts on the exhaust valve assembly to remove it from the engine. You need to loosen off that jam nut and pry up on that little plastic piece that holds it onto the actuator, and then you can remove the entire assembly from the motor, and I'll disassemble it and put it into the ultrasonic cleaner. Okay, the exhaust valves are out, and as you can see, these actually aren't too bad. There's not a whole lot of kilometers on this sled. It's only been through 1 season, and as we all know, last season wasn't a great year. So I'm going to take these apart. I'll scrape some of the carbon off of them. I'll put them into the ultrasonic cleaner, and then I'll come back and I'll clean the ports up so that they're nice and clean when they go back in. So the exhaust valves are taken apart. The gaskets are off. Don't forget to take those off if you are going to use an ultrasonic cleaner. I'm not sure how the rubber would like the hot temperature. And as you can see, they didn't look that bad, but there was quite a bit of buildup in these recesses in here. Right down in there where the springs sit. So now it's going to go in here for 2 30-minute cycles, and I'll show you what they look like when they come out. So this is the reason why I scraped those exhaust ports, is all that carbon buildup came out of those ports, and if you don't scrape that off, it's all going to end up back on your nice and clean exhaust valves when you put them back in. So make sure you clean those ports before you put your valves back in. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the rear axle wheels out. I've already got one off, so I've loosened the track off. I've taken the torsion springs off, which allows you to get to that bolt a lot easier. I'm going to take the 6 idler wheels off, and then I'm going to bang all the bearings out and clean them all and re-grease them, put them all back in. And then once I'm done that, I will get that upper wheel, which I have to take this bolt out on both sides, lower the skid down to allow me to get access to that wheel, and then I'll clean them and put everything back together. So I've banged all the bearings out of all the wheels, and as you can see, even though this sled doesn't have a ton of kilometers on it, there really isn't a lot of grease in these bearings when they're new. And the grease does get contaminated. So even though there's not a lot of kilometers on it, it's nice to clean all that dirt out and repack it with a good quality synthetic grease. While you have all the wheels off, or I mean even before you do that, obviously check to see how your sliders are, because if you need to replace them, now is the time. These ones are okay. There's not a whole lot of wear on them, so I don't need to replace these, but if you did, obviously there's a bolt up in here, or a Torx head right there, that you take off, and then you slide them out the back. Ooh, it's not focusing. Slide them out through the back in the hole in the track. They will fit through there. It's a tight fit, but they will fit through, and then the new ones would go through the same hole, and you would push them back on. What I like to do is I usually like to put a little bit of grease on the slider as it goes back on. It's easier to go on, and it's easier to come off the next time that you need to replace them. So while those bearings and the exhaust valves are in the ultrasonic cleaner for the next hour, I'm going to pop these clutches off. I'm going to clean the clutches, and then once the secondary is off, you're going to see I'm going to take a look at the jack shaft bearing and the drive shaft bearing, and I'll pop the seals off of them and I'll see what they look like. 9 times out of 10, I blow the old grease out with some brake clean, compress air, and then repack it full of fresh grease. But we'll see what it looks like when I get that far. Okay, the clutches are clean. Wash the belt as well. You can see they turned out really nice and clean. Go back in focus. Yeah, so the next thing that we're gonna do is I'm gonna pop the seal on the jack shaft. I'm gonna take that cup off so I can get to the drive shaft bearing. Sorry about the focus. So yeah, I'm gonna take this cup off here so I can get to the drive shaft bearing. Check what it looks like. I'm gonna clean all the oil tank underneath where the clutches are, and that's what we're gonna do now. The drive shaft bearing is usually what I find. Had some water in there. When I pop the seal off, I'll back up so you can see what I'm looking at there. So here's the drive shaft bearing, and try to get it back in focus. Okay, so the drive shaft bearing, the bottom one, when I pop the cover off, the seal, it had some water sitting down here at the bottom, which is pretty common after the season. So I've blown it all out with brake clean. I've used compressed air. It's nice and clean now. There's no play in it. It's nice and smooth, so there's no issue with that. So I'm going to pack it full of fresh grease. Jack shaft bearing here, I pulled the cover off. The grease wasn't too bad, but I blew the grease out of there as well. Cleaned it all up. Same process as I did for the drive shaft bearing, and packed it full of fresh grease. So it's ready to go. I'll put a little bit of grease, a tiny little bit of grease on the shafts and the spline. Make sure that the secondary slides off easily next year. And I'll pack that drive shaft bearing full of grease, put the seal back on, and then I'll put the cover back on. I put a little bit of grease on the inside of the cup, as the outside of the race usually gets a little bit of corrosion on it. So I've taken a Scotch Brite pad and I've cleaned that up. I'll put this cover back on, and then I'll put the 6 T40s back around the outside. Now when you're putting this back on, you can't do it if the track's tight, so the track's got to be loose. And I simply just take a piece of 2x4 and I push the drive shaft bearing or the drive shaft up, just so I can align the screws or the bolts when I put them back in. So I've cleaned all the oil tank. I've put the drive shaft bearing cup back on. I've also wiped down and got rid of all the buildup of belt dust in this area, so it's nice and clean. The primary's back on, torqued to 80 foot-pounds, which is what the P85 needs. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this TRS alignment bar. It goes into the primary and it shows you how much you need to shim the secondary out. And we're going to do that by, these are the existing secondary shims. And once I put the bar on with the secondary, it'll show me how much I need to shim the secondary out so that the secondary and the primary are perfectly aligned. So I have the secondary back on. The alignment bar is in there. And I'm going to try to show you, maybe it will work. You can see the gap. The gap right here between the alignment bar and the secondary. So what I need to do now is I need to add shims at the back on the jack shaft to push the secondary out so that it will touch this bar right here. And then you know that your primary and secondary clutches are aligned properly. So I've added the shims. As you can see now, it is touching. So you know your secondary is aligned to your primary. So how you do that is you add these depending on what the gap is. And then it pushes it out to the bar, and you know you're good. Now the second step of this is you need to adjust whatever you added to the back. You need to add to the bolt, because if you don't, when you thread this in and you tighten down your secondary bolt, there's not going to be enough float. And float means when your clutch is moving in and out, and I'll show you once I have these adjusted properly. But what that allows it to do is it allows it to move back and forth slightly on the jack shaft, and you need that. You don't want it to be tight, and if you don't add shims, essentially washers here, to match what you put on the back, and you're going to have a problem. And this is what I'm talking about for float. So get my feeler gauges in here. This is 54 1/1000ths of an inch. See how it floats back and forth on the jack shaft? That's what you want. And I'm happy with 54 1/1000ths. So I had to add a little bit more to the secondary bolt to push it out to give me that float. But now your clutches are all aligned. The next thing I'm going to do is replace the plugs. This isn't really a complicated process. Just wanted to show you that they are done as part of this pre-season service. And then next what we're going to do is we are going to get down in here. We're going to adjust the chain case and then change out the chain case fluid. But I'll throw the new set of plugs in and then we'll move on to the chain case. So the exhaust valves are out of the ultrasonic cleaner, and as you can see, they're pretty much like new when they come out of there. And then the bearings are the same. So the bearings are all ready to get re-greased. So I'm going to put these valves back in, and then I'm going to repack these bearings, put them back into the wheels, and then I will put them back in the sled. So I have the chain case adjusted. You loosen off the jam nut there. You back off the threaded bolt. You turn it as tight as you can by hand, and then a quarter turn backwards and tighten that jam nut back up. And as far as the fluid, I'm going to pull this plug out. This is a pretty, like I said earlier, this is a pretty low mile sled. Unless there's any signs of shavings or anything I should be concerned about on that magnetic drain plug, what I'm going to do is I'm going to suck the fluid out. This little tool does a pretty good job of getting most of the fluid out. You stick this down in the hole. It sucks. It holds 300 milliliters and it sucks 300 milliliters out. So it does a pretty good job of getting everything out. Then I'll, if there is signs of concern, then I will open up the entire chain case, but on a relatively new sled with low kilometers, as long as there's no signs of there being an issue, I would simply replace the fluid and then obviously again check it next time. All the wheels are back in to the skid. So now what I need to do is adjust the track tension and track alignment. So what I use to do this is I use this tool. Instead of having to hang a 10-pound weight off of the track and get a ruler to measure, this tool is very handy. It's made by this place here, isat.com. I ordered it online. You can order it online. I've been using this tool for years. It's very accurate. And the good thing about this tool is I'll show you how it works later, but as you tighten it up, the track will push up to that line. and then your alignment is pretty much bang on every time. There's only been a couple times where I've had to fine tune the alignment, but other than that, this thing works pretty well. So on these sleds, you want to go 16 inches from the rear axle, which is essentially right here. I don't need to measure anymore. I've done so many of these, I know where it is. So you get the window and the track in the right spot. You put this tool in here, and of course this is going to be hard with one hand. What you do is, I've got mine marked with this yellow line where I like the to set the track tension to. I run my tracks on the loose side. I have to put this phone down. So here you go. Put it in there. You tighten the track up, and it's going to push up to the red line. And when you're at the red line, you know you're good. And that's based on where I have it set to. And then I'll go and do the other side. And then your track tension and alignment is going to be set. Okay, almost done. Last thing, not the last, but one of the last things you want to do is you want to check your belt deflection. And you change your belt deflection with this adjustment stud. And if you want to make your belt looser, you would tighten this stud. If you want to make your belt tighter, which we need to do in this case, I'm going to loosen this stud so it comes out, which is going to allow the secondary to close more. And the reason I want to do that is if you look at the belt's right down inside the secondary. So what you want to see, it's barely sticking up above the secondary. So what I do is I'll do it on the stand with it running, and I will tighten the belt until the track is just creeping on its own at idle. And then I tighten this down. Now you want to be careful with this. These things are prone to breaking. And what I do is I heat it up a little bit first with a propane torch. And then I adjust it so that it prevents it from breaking these studs. I've broken a lot of them, enough of them, even with heating it up. So they're not overly fun to get out. You have to disassemble the entire secondary clutch. And when you're at the end of this service, that's the last thing you really want to do. So I'm going to back that stud out because I know it has to come up, and then I will put the pipe and the can back on, put the hood back on. I'll fire this thing up and run it on the stand. I will then check the belt deflection. I will then check the track alignment, which, like I said before, with that tool is pretty much always bang on. There is some times that I've had to fine tune it side to side. So we'll see what things look like after I get the pipe and the can back on and the hood, and we fire this thing up. So the track alignment was fine. Didn't have to touch it. I've tightened the jam nuts and everything on the adjusters back there. And then on the secondary now, you can see how the belt is slightly sticking above the secondary, which is typically where it needs to be. But it is, I did run it on the stand. The track is just barely creeping at idle, so that's where I like to put the belt deflection. So now what I'll do is I will put the side panels back on this thing. I will wipe it down, and then the last thing I'll do is going to be updating the 7S. So I'll put the latest software version on there for this customer, and then this sled will be done. So as I said at the beginning of this video, this isn't so much a how-to video, because I know I went over things very quickly. My intention was not to explain how to do things. My intention was to show everybody what I do for a pre-season service, because I've been asked in the past, you know, what do I do? What should I do? What do you recommend doing? Anyway, this is what I do. This is what I do for my customer sleds. Obviously, if I'm doing something and I observe that there's an issue, case in point, if there's an issue with the chain case, or if I see you know, an issue with the track or missing studs or what have you, then I will let the customer know and I'll address that at that point. But this sled was, there's no issues, as I would expect. This 2024 with approximately 1,200 kilometers on it. I didn't think that there was going to be an issue, but it's a good thing that you know, the bearings were serviced, all the wheel bearings are done, the clutches are clean, the belt deflection needed to be addressed, and the chain case fluid changed, the exhaust valves cleaned, obviously. So that's what it is. That's what I do, and if you have any questions, just message me. I figured I would just mention how to do the 7S update. As you can see here, it's updating now. So the way you do that is you have to go to the Ride Command website and you have to download the latest Snowmobile 7S. There is a difference between the off-road and the Snowmobile. And there's the new splash screen. So you do need to download the software to a USB stick. USB stick then plugs into the cable at the back of the 7S. And then you go into the settings. There you can see there, it's telling you that it's updated. So you go into the settings, you go to all settings, and you go to general. You scroll down to update software. And you hit that. It'll notice the latest software is on your USB stick, and you simply hit install. It'll do it itself. It'll restart. It'll bring up that message saying it's done. And then you know that your 7S now is up to the most current version. And that changes usually a couple times a year. That's the latest one that's on the Ride Command website, but that's how you do it.